On behalf of OIL, the Organization for Islamic Learning, it is an honor and a privilege to welcome Sheikh Arif, who has joined us all the way from the UK and has taken time out of his busy schedule to be with us.
I'll give you a little background on Sheikh Arif because I see a lot of new faces here, and I think it'll be good to just give that. Originally, Sheikh Arif is from Uganda. He moved to England, like many of us. We had to move across for further study, so he went to England for further education and graduated from Madrasa Al-Khoi. He's also been to Iran for Arabic and Islamic studies. In England, he established the Al-Mahdi Institute in the UK, which is one that I have had the privilege of visiting as well. And currently he's the director and senior lecturer at Al-Mahdi, where he teaches Usul al-Fiqh and Islamic philosophy. And I'm going to introduce our speaker, Sheikh Arif, please, with a loud salawat.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen, wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Amma ba'd, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm indeed honored and privileged to be given this opportunity to discuss such a central theme that affects every thinking, conscious human individual at some point in his or her life. And to a great extent, the response to this question shapes their outlook and the way in which they lead real human life. Basically, the existence of suffering and its reconciliation with the existence of God. This question, inasmuch as it poses a problem in the minds of the antagonists and brings about an argument that defeats the existence of God, it also assures the theist and the believer of the existence of God and allows them to endure during trials, sufferings, misfortunes, calamities. What makes this debate a very real debate is that, as opposed to a philosopher who thinks in an abstract sense through a process of rational propositions and comes to conclusion, is that real life and real people live through this problem in a very different way. It is here that we see that no form of philosophical response or deliberation upon such a fundamental issue is going to be satisfactory. There has to be the input of real human experience and real human beings, and then it can be made sense of. It is here that's why we thought that prior to advancing the logical and the philosophical, the mystical, the spiritual arguments and discussions for or against the existence of God or reconciliation of suffering and the existence of a benevolent, omnipotent, omniscient God, that we should, as a starting point, share our real human experiences concerned with this very issue, which then sets the scene for our discussions. On the one hand, and hopefully after at the end of our interactive session, we will introduce the subject and how we propose to take it forward in the next 2 days. On the one hand, we find a world. When we say a world, we do not necessarily mean Mother Earth. We are talking about existence at large, whatever is conceivable, observable, and whatever can be imagined beyond that. We see a wonderful world that operates meticulously with utmost precision. When we look at human history, we see gray areas, bleak areas. We see instances of great suffering. We see instances of discord. But when we look at the past in the context of the present, we always come out with an understanding that that was necessary for this stage to be achieved. We always state to ourselves that that was something which was considered evil at that point, but it has contributed to an overall good at this point. When we look at the life of this earth and the way the earth is arranged, we find that nothing is out of place. Now, in the face of all this beauty, design, arrangement, purposeful world, at present, when we look into ourselves as individuals, and when we look at the human community, we find that it sticks out like a sore thumb at times. We find that we cannot reconcile between the notion of beauty that prevails everywhere, purposeful existence, and my suffering at present. Whether that suffering be experienced by me psychologically in my own context, or be suffered by me through observing the sufferings of others. It is here then that we ask the question that if everything is so well designed, so purposeful, and if the God that we subscribe to is truly the all-perfect, knowing, omnipotent God who has no limitations, then why does he allow this state to prevail? Now, pay special attention to what we are saying. When we look in hindsight, everything seems to fall in place. I'm talking about the absolute present, but at present, I am suffering. At present, this is the plight of the human community. Yes, Hussein Salamullah alayhi was killed brutally. People allowed it to happen. If Imam Hussein was on his journey to his Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, then he maybe have accepted whatever was coming his way gracefully. But what of those people from his family who were affected adversely through his brutal killing? They felt horrendous pain, unbearable pain, and it was a horrendous crime that was committed. Children were kept thirsty, and a child's throat was slit. But what about the mother of that child? Now, today when we look at that scene, we will say it was a necessary condition for humanity to have progressed to the level to which it has progressed now. Today, we will not allow a tyrant to chip away at our autonomy, free will, liberty, because Hussein has set an example of defiance for us. This is not what we're talking about. We are talking about the present time in which Imam Hussein was killed and the sufferings that ensued at that point, and the mother who must have prayed for the life of her 6-month-old child and was denied. Today we know that the fact that I'm using Imam Hussein as an example because we relate to him in a very caring, loving, gentle, affectionate way. And it moves us all. Today we know that maybe it was good that Abbas ibn Ali did not fetch the water from the Al-Qama. We know it was good. Today we know. For what Abbas stands for. But at the time when Abbas looked towards the heavens, and this is a description, in his eyes filled with tears, and he said, "O Lord, do not disappoint me. Allow me to take water, bring water back to these thirsty children." He made that prayer. He was in that position where he required assistance and maybe intervention, but was denied. At that moment of denial, is there a question Well, what is happening? You can't find somebody better than Abbas to make a supplication. On the other hand, God responds and says, ask me and I shall grant. We will not expect God to deny. Now, although today we are making sense of that incident in the positive way, I'm talking about it at the time when it was happening. Similarly, at present in our lives, we find a lot of suffering. This suffering apparently becomes a point of conflict. On the one hand, we believe in a God that has no restriction and is perfectly good. On the other hand, we are seeing a perfectly good world. But for one facet of the world, which is human existence, animal existence, our interaction with our situations, and the suffering that comes through it. That is one point at present that is confusing us. Now, we have seen the human community either grow through this towards God at present, or flatly deny the existence of God. Now, before we get into our discussions, we will obviously be explaining every term that we will be using so that there is not much ambiguity. By and large, we find that the thinking becomes blurred due to presumptions in our language, so we will clarify the terms. But before we go into our discussions, we need to set the scene. As we said, in truth, it is a human discussion, not human as philosopher, nor human as a logician, nor human as a Sufi. It is a human discussion per se, human as human. I experience this in my life. What does it mean to me, and how do I make sense of it? Now I see that some of the tables are fairly full and the others are empty, so I don't know how we will conduct this particular session, unless, of course, maybe if we can merge the people on the table so that all of them are full, and it's a very directed and a concise discussion. We need to respond to the next 4 questions sequentially. These series of questions will set the tone for the rest of our discussion, so if we can just write them down. And this is all based on our experiences and the way we have led our lives and the way we are at present. What role does God play, or what function does God have in our lives during moments of suffering? Whether the suffering affects us directly or indirectly. That's the first question. 2, at points, why doesn't God relieve our suffering? 3, why has God created a world, now I'm going to use a term here, but I said I'll clarify it afterwards, that has evil and that leads to suffering? And the final question, on the basis that there really is evil in the world that leads to suffering, and God does not remove it, then does that pose a problem for the existence and the nature of God? Now, I've used the term suffering and left it ambiguous, not explaining. And there is a reason for doing so, because we all understand suffering and what it means without definition. Yes? So a wall may break in this banquet hall. For example, nobody will get hurt. It won't mean anything to me. But the owner who has spent a lot of money will be suffering. It is his psychological interaction with that event, whether that event is deemed as evil or otherwise. And that's why we've used the word suffering. Now, if we can just maybe group ourselves more fully, and within 20 minutes, each table can give their thoughts, and that will set the scene for our discussions. Okay, the God that we will be discussing will have several definitions, but we will go by the theistic definition of God. The theistic definition, I'll just say it for now, and afterwards we'll discuss properly, is an omnipotent God, all-powerful, omniscient, all-aware, omnipresent, who is everywhere, perfectly good and does not want anything but good. That's the notion of God.